Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me, and we're switching roles for these videos, so we're trying something new. But this is the East Region video, Joe. A lot of excellent coaches in this region. That is certainly the prevailing theory. You've got some already Hall of Famers, some future Hall of Famers, a couple of Big Ten teams, a couple of Big East teams. So, um, this is going to be a fun one. We do have Duke and Siena at the top. Shouldn't really be all that concerned for Duke in the round of 64. For them, I think it's just going to be which coach is going to have to get to the arena early to scout the 8-9 game, which is happening right before them.
Yeah, Sean, I think the prevailing storyline in this entire region is going to be the health of Caleb Foster. Uh, you know, I don't think he's going to return anytime soon. That probably includes the Final Four. The health of Gangba too. That's really, unfortunately, the status. So I don't think Siena will provide much of a challenge for the Blue Devils. I believe they're going to be significant. They already are significant favorites. We could skip to this 8-9 game, which I find really interesting.
Yeah,
TCU.
this is the game of the round of 64, I think, and we get it first at 12:15 Eastern on Thursday. And obviously, Ohio State's the Big Ten. You played TCU, Joe, so you take this matchup away.
Yeah, Sean, this is actually a fascinating matchup, contrasting styles, kind of what we talked about in the South region. This TCU team is very dangerous, and this is a team that's beaten or come close to beating a lot of good teams. They also beat Michigan earlier in the year. They beat Florida, and they handle Wisconsin pretty handily. It's such a strange team, Sean.
Yeah.
They're a very competitive team. One thing I like, aside from one weird loss at Colorado and UCF. This is a team that does not get blown out very often. It hasn't been blown out since that weirder game on the first day of February in Colorado. So I expect this game to be really, really close. I think Bruce Thornton, John Mobley have played some of their best basketball lately. I think the key to this game is going to be the secondary and third options. I know Brock Harding does a lot for TCU. I know Coach Dixon's defensive acumen is going to certainly slow down the Buckeyes. I think it slows down Bruce Thornton to an extent, and I think it forces the Buckeyes to adapt and find other options. Like, is that a Christoph Tilley, perhaps down low? Can they get some presence there? Can they get Devin Royal rolling again? And I think what it comes down to, Sean, is Ohio State's third and fourth options. I think TCU kind of has to cross their fingers that John Mobley Jr., who's unguardable at times when he shoots deep from three, is not on. If that happens, it's going to be on the third and fourth options for Ohio State. So I'm actually going to pick TCU to win this one shot. I think Ohio State is red hot. I think people love Ohio State right now, and I certainly do. I just think this matchup and playing against Jamie Dixon is such a nightmare matchup that people aren't acknowledging. It's a guy who's been around, won a lot of tournament games, certainly have has shut down pretty prolific offenses in the past, and I think he does that here. Give me the Horned Frogs.
Yeah, the defense is the story for TCU this year. They ranked number 20, 30 rather, in defensive efficiency. They had just an incredibly odd non-conference. Joe, you mentioned the good. They did lose on the opening day to the New Orleans Privateers, 200th in Ken Palm. That didn't make a whole lot of sense. They lost at home to Notre Dame. Look, they were a little bit better before they lost some players to injuries, but they had like a crazy weird resume, and they just took care of business. If that sounds familiar, that's what Ohio State did too. Both these teams are on the bubble. About a month ago, they win some games going in. This TCU team is playing really well. They're defending well, and they are two like hero games from Darren Peterson, we'll talk about in a little bit. But they were probably the better team in both of those games against Kansas. I just think Ohio State's playing too well right now. Over the last month, Ohio State is fifth in Torvik, so I'm going to go with the Buckeyes.
Okay, Sean.
But this,
Go ahead.
yeah. This next one, Joe, the Patino Self potential meetup. St. John's has Northern Iowa first out in California. Kansas has Cal Baptist. Is it simple as just moving the two coaches to the next round?
I think so. And I know this was screwed up a lot last year, but you have to remember Kansas was playing Arkansas, who, as a 10 seed, I thought significantly overperformed that, even in their loss to Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. I think St. John's, I feel a lot better about this team, which is weird to say with the loss of RJ Lewis and Kadari Richmond, I feel a lot better about the St. John's teams. They're battle tested.
Yeah.
They've been in plenty of close games this year. I think last year they blew a lot of teams out. And I know, I think recency bias would tell you, oh, they blew out UConn. But it's a team that I think Zuby Ejiofor is the key here. And he always is the key. But I think him being the steady force of that locker room, along with Bryce Hopkins, who's won a lot of games in the Big East. I just don't see them falling asleep here against Northern Iowa. I think Rick Pitino has been in plenty of tournaments to know that these upsets happen. And for the most part, Sean, when Pitino gets upset per se, it's not in the round of 64. I just do not see it happening. I think St. John's is too big. I think they make other teams who are way more talented make a lot of mistakes, and I certainly think they'll make Northern Iowa do that. Give me the Red Storm in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Red Storm in both this game and the next game, Joe. Not around a 32 preview, but I think they have the best chance to make the Sweet 16. Um, Last year they lost because they had a horrendous shooting day against an Arkansas team that got hot. But I agree with you. I think this team is better than the St. John's team that was a 2 seed last year going into the tournament. The reason why the Red Storm are on the 5 line is because they stubbed their toe a few times in non-conference. Not to bad teams, but they didn't beat a tournament team in the non-conference, and they played Bama at home, lost. Iowa State neutral, lost. They beat Baylor, but they lost to Auburn on a neutral, and then they lost to Kentucky on a neutral. Like, they beat Ole Miss at home. Like, that is not the St. John's team that comes into the tournament. So I think they're playing really well, as the Big East tournament suggests. And I think Northern Iowa is a little bit of a weird team out of the Missouri Valley. They were the 6th seed, but they were really the second best team because they had a key injury, and they were 2-6 when that player was out. He's come back, but I do think there's enough to overcome a bad shooting day here. Whereas last year against in the round of 32 there wasn't. But yeah, give me St. John's to advance. And Cal Baptist is a little bit interesting in the way that this game is going to be like an hour from their campus. It's the closest campus to their team, but I don't know if they're going to fill an NBA arena or anything like that. But you worried at all here for Kansas?
Not really, to be honest with you. I think that with Darren Peterson playing, this is a team that has rarely lost to teams that don't know their profile. And I think a lot of it is what a lot of things that are made about Kansas is the Darren Peterson kind of underperforming, but they still went 12-6 in the Big 12. I don't know
Yeah.
why that's underperforming for any team. Certainly, you throw the brand of Kansas next to it, it's pretty easy to pick apart. And the recent history losses to Arizona State and Houston suggests they're not finding momentum, but you have to remember they're still one of the most talented teams in the country, and I do think talent still matters in this day and age. So give me the Jayhawks, give me Darren Peterson, Trey White, and Coach Self to face Coach Petito, and I think Baduga too is just too much down low for Cal Baptist to handle. I think the Jayhawks cruise here.
Yeah, and like I said it with St. John's, Joe, I think Kansas has a better team than they brought to the tournament last year. Peterson has been like incredible. He has not been super consistent, even when he's been on the floor, but they haven't really played their best outside of Allen Fieldhouse. Probably their 6 best results are at home. So, and is it L.A.? It's San Diego. San Diego is certainly pretty far away from or wherever in California it is. It might be L.A., but that's far away from Lawrence, Kansas, wherever it is. So I think they
Yeah.
might. That's why I think they might get got in the second round if they do advance. But let's move to the bottom part of this East region, Joe. We've got what I think is probably the most intriguing first round matchup. Louisville and South Florida. You've got Pat Kelsey and the Louisville Cardinals going up against Brian Hodgson and his South Florida Bulls. Don't know how much you've got on this matchup, but it's two very similar teams that can light it up from downtown.
Yeah, Sean, I think this is a fascinating matchup. And I think what's funny is a lot of people have penciled in South Florida. And while I agree a lot with that, what's interesting is I think Louisville has the best chance of any 6 seed to beat their preceding, I mean, their following 3 seed, which is Michigan State. To me, this is interesting. A lot of the line would suggest that, oh, this is going to be a pickup or whatever. Louisville was a 5.5, went down to a 4.5 point favorite here. I think it's going to be pretty simple here, Sean. I think if Ryan Conwell has his way, it dictates the game. We're going to see what happens in a lot of Louisville games. They kind of score in bunches, and I do think this game is going to be wicked close. But I think Louisville's been enough of these, certainly been on the wrong side of a few where they're not necessarily going to be panicking. I think South Florida has not really been as battle tested and not to the detriment of their schedule nor the conference they're in. Just more so they've been so dominant that I don't know how they'll handle, trading blow for blow. I think if South Florida wins this
Yeah.
game shot, it's where they have a 10 point lead and just keep extending the lead and the arena turns against Louisville, which as you know, Sean, you're an Indiana fan, I'm a Michigan fan. You know how it goes in any conference tournament neutral game. If you're the lower seed, the
The
higher seed, the underdog is always the crowd's favorite.
and the Michigan State fans who I'm forgetting Joe if they are first or second here, but
They are second.
If South Florida is winning, the Michigan State fans who are there are going to be rooting for the team that is the same color as them. It sort of does affect things. South Florida does play a big tempo or a fast tempo, Joe, and the scary part is like you're not going to know any better to just not beat Louisville. They're not going to beat Louisville at that game. That's how they're going to lose. The status of Michael Brown is up in the air. He didn't play in the ACC tournament, so I'm not really sure what to expect from him. If he plays, Joe, I think it would be really, really tough to see Louisville losing. But if he doesn't play, or if he's severely limited, and Conwell doesn't have the best game, the other players for Louisville haven't always performed. So I think it'll be a good game, but I think, 6 times out of 10, Louisville does get the job done. Michigan State playing the Bison from North Dakota State. You know, don't know what there is to really worry about here from Michigan State.
Somehow this is the most picked 14 over 3. I think it was trending between that and the Illinois UPenn preview we went over for the South region. Don't see much for reason here. I know
Yeah.
is though a lot of MSU fans, 10 years ago, yes, I know about the Middle Tennessee State game. I don't think a team is going to shoot like that ever again against Michigan State, let alone such an inferior talent-wise team. Give me the Spartan Dogs to roll here. Think they are destined for a 3-6 and then potentially the Sweet 16 matchup everyone wants to see, who we'll talk about down here.
Yeah, I do like Michigan State. Just I'm going to do a video probably after we're done tonight, Joe, of me just filling out my bracket. Spoiler alert: might have the Spartans winning a couple of games. We've got another Big Ten team here in the 7-10, Joe. It's UCLA and Mick Cronin going up against Johnny Dawkins and UCF. Um, this game's in Philadelphia. Can't be the most fun for Bruins to get out there, as we mentioned on the In a Nutshell. But UCLA is playing really good basketball coming into this tournament. They did have a nice run in the Big Ten tournament, including beating Michigan State just last week. It's pretty clear that if Donovan Dent and Tyler Bilodeau are anywhere close to 100%, they're probably the better team here.
I agree, Sean, and I still want to give a tip of cap to Johnny Dawkins, as you saw in some of our collaborated polls. He was Big 12 Coach of the Year. I think it's a team that's overperformed, and the reason that's worth mentioning here is this is a team with nothing to lose.
Yeah,
Sean, I'm
they've
actually going to
gotten to
pick.
where they want to get this year.
Yeah,
Like, this is a
I'm actually going to pick
bonus.
the. I'm actually going to pick UCF to win this game. Sean's long documented that I think UCLA's only won one or two games on the Eastern time zone.
I think it's one because Illinois is central. So, yeah.
Yep.
Penn State.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say about that too, Sean, is, UCLA, whether Bilodeau or Dead or healthy, I don't think they're close to 100%. I think there's going to have to be other contributions from Eric Daly, a Sky Clark, but I think UCF can limit those guys and force UCLA to go to even more secondary options, such as Xavier Booker. And, you know, we've seen too often this year, Sean, UCLA dig themselves holes in games and never really come out of it. There's been times they've clawed for a bit and then just fallen right back down. I think this might happen again to the Bruins. And I think the UCF Knights get an upset.
Yeah, so in terms of the profile for UCF, they're 39th in offense, 114 in defense. When it comes to, like, is certainly better at defense. UCF definitely has the athletes to get good shots. Now, making them is a different story. They are 286th in 3-point rate, despite being 48th in percentage. So they shoot it at a good clip, but they don't shoot a lot of them. Um, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to the fact that they're still a good offense, despite clearly not doing what they're better at more often. They don't turn it over a ton. Um, they take a lot of twos and they don't get to the free throw line a lot. So I think that sort of falls right into the UCLA trap defensively. Like, not that UCLA has like great rim protection, but if you're going to be taking contested twos all day, um, I like UCLA to advance here on the with the qualifier that Dent and Bilodeau play. I think Dent will definitely play. Bilodeau a little bit of a different story, but interesting matchup there in Philly. The other matchup is the Huskies against Furman. And Joe, I'll just say this: if there's a 15 seed to win, I think it's going to be the Paladins. They've got
No, no, Shad, that's crazy.
wait, what's the other 15 seed? I don't think it'll happen, but
Yeah, well, I guess if you had to pick one, but
yeah.
I'd still put it at a 2% chance.
But the mentality for UConn here is what's important, right? How are they reacting to that shellacking at the hands of St. John's in the Big East tournament? They're here because they had a great non-conference schedule where they beat Florida and where they beat
Illinois.
Illinois, and they played Arizona really close. But obviously, the Hurley machine has been great over these past few years. But where are you at with this UConn team? Were they lucky that they were in a bad conference? But on the other hand, they did clearly show that they're a good team in the non-con.
They're a competent team, at least in the non-con. I think they're a great team. I think what it's going to come down to, Sean, for UConn is can the secondary options hit? Can Terrace Reed avoid going to the free throw line, for example? That's just a silly joke of mine. But I think what has to happen here and what you've seen in a few of their losses is they need certain guys to get going. I think Alex Caravan really needs to like show why he had his number retired by UConn. I think the real key here, Sean, one guy who could become a March legend for UConn is Braylon Mullins, the freshman from Indiana. Can he convert from the 3-point line? Can he help UConn space that floor even more? Because I think we know Demery and Ball can are two very viable guard options. St. John's certainly didn't make it look that way sometimes, but they still are one of the more impressive guard combos in the entire nation. Can they get enough from their bench? I think they can, at least to get to the Sweet 16, and then from there, they'll have to figure it out. But I still think UConn is so talented and has a good enough bench where it's going to be extremely difficult to pick this team off. It's going to require a lot of guys like an Alex Carabrand, a Silas Demery, a Solo Ball, having and a Terrace Reed, frankly, too, having putrid performances for them to lose any of these two games, whether that's UCF, UCLA, or against Furman here.
Yeah, they are clearly the better team. They have had some issues with dealing with lesser opposition this year. They did go 17-3 in the Big East, which you'll be like, well, of course. But sorry, they lost 4 games, counting the tournament. 2 of them were to St. John's, but they let a ton of bad teams stick around. Joe, like they had an overtime win against Villanova at home. They were down with, in the second half against Seton Hall both times. They lost to Marquette on the final day with a chance for a Big East title on the line. So I think that, if UConn can shake the stench of that off, the last day of the Big East season and the Big East tournament where they were in a close game against Georgetown in the semifinals, I think they'll be fine to get to the Sweet 16. But, look, if they win the first round, it's short prep for one of 2 unique systems, whether it's Mick Cronin or Johnny Dawkins. So I think UConn definitely a little bit worried that they might stub their toe here. But Joe, we're going to wrap this video up for the East region. Please check out the other ones if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.